Hello Canadians, welcome to the final episode of All Things Canadia, the Canadian show that was thus far not about hockey. Why thus far? Well, because today we're going to talk about Canadian culture and identity. I've been talking about politics for the last 9 videos, so I decided to lighten things up a bit before the next video series. Hint hint, it's going to be about federal political parties. Or history. I haven't decided yet. Anyways, culture and identity. So when I approach someone and tell them I'm Canadian, usually I get one of 2 responses, depending on the type of person. Either they call me a socialist and walk away, or they punch me in the face because I'm a Maple Leafs fan. There, I said it, I'm a Maple Leafs fan, get over it. So inevitably we're going to have to talk about sports, so I'm just going to rip the band-aid off once and for all. The national summer sport, derived from some Native American sport that existed for centuries before colonization, is lacrosse, and we're pretty good at it. Other popular summer sports, especially for the Habs, include golf, field hockey, and soccer, which is not called football like it is in Europe. In fact, Canada has its own professional football league, in which the competitors play for the Grey Cup, named after, no joke, the Earl Grey, who was the Governor-General of Canada in the early 20th century. Not an uncommon occurrence, by the way, and here I say it because ice hockey plays for the Stanley Cup, named after Lord Stanley, who was the Governor-General of Canada in the late 19th century. Ice hockey, Canada's national winter sport, was allegedly invented on the east coast of Canada, in Windsor, Nova Scotia, although many competing theories exist. Other winter sports include basketball, skiing, snowboarding, and the fun-to-play but terrorizing to watch curling. Phew, sports, ladies and gentlemen. On to our next tirade, art. There are a whole bunch of different types of art: visual art, theater, film, literature, television, and music. So let me give a brief summary of each one quickly. Visual art. Like everything I have ever or will ever talk about in Canada, our art is a blend of French, English, and Native American styles. Canadian art is not dominated by one of the 3 cultures, but is in fact a tasteful blend of the 3. The first truly distinct Canadian art came from the Group of 7, a group of painters who worked after the First World War, who explored really Canadian themes, and a lot of nature. Next, stage theatre. Canada has a rich history of stage theatre, although it descends mostly from the British tradition. There's a town in Ontario called Stratford, named after William Shakespeare's birthplace, Stratford-upon-Avon, and one of the major facets of their economy is something called the Shakespeare Festival. It's pretty awesome. The next part of stage theatre is not generally considered as art by many, but by me it is, and it's stand-up comedy. Canada is world famous for its comedy festivals, and Just for Laughs Montreal is one of the biggest comedy festivals in the world. Moving on, film. Now there are 2 aspects to film. The first is the Canadian aspect. There are many Canadian filmmakers and actors who live and work in Canada and create distinctly Canadian film. Canadian film is heavily subsidized by something called the National Film Board, which assists in the production of Canadian film. And as the producer of many Canadian films, the National Film Board, which is a crown corporation, has won 12 Academy Awards and received many nominations. The second part of film are Canadian filmmakers and actors who went to work in the United States and received considerable fame. Among them, of course, are Jason Reitman, James Cameron, Mary Pickford, Ryan Reynolds, Ryan Gosling, and the list goes on. Literature. A lot of famous writers and books have come from Canada, including Anne of Green Gables, Little House on the Prairie, and The English Patient. My favorite Canadian author is Robertson Davies, and he wrote something called the Deptford Trilogy, which was absolutely fantastic. Like most other art, literature is subsidized by the Canadian Council of the Arts, a crown corporation that subsidizes many up-and-coming Canadian artists. Music. There are a lot of famous Canadian musicians, including Celine Dion, Michael Bublé, and Rush. I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you about Canada's rich history of cultural protectionism. Because Canada's culture is a delicate blend of Aboriginal, English, and French cultures, any tip in the balance would disrupt the core of Canadian culture. Canadians are especially wary of American culture encroaching on Canadian culture, seeing as America is the rebellious older brother that broke off violently from the Empire and has a more aggressive history. Because of Canada's cultural protectionism, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, the CRTC, generally requires a quota of Canadian content on Canadian radio and television stations, usually around 50%, but it fluctuates. Finally, while we're on the topic of quotas, let's talk about Canadian television. There are a lot of distinctly Canadian shows, like Hockey Night in Canada and Corner Gas and Little Mosque on the Prairie, that generally fulfill the Canadian quota requirement so that networks can air American or foreign television. Quick note on television, there's a crown corporation called the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and although it is government funded, it also partially funds itself through advertisements. So it's not like the BBC where it's completely government funded and completely commercial free, but more like a news network that's subsidized by the government. The CBC, although its influence has waned, is still the most watched networks for news and especially on election nights. Many CBC personalities have gone on to the political sphere, even onto the Governor Generalship. Finally, we move on to the last portion, and my favorite portion of Canadian culture, food. I'm just going to show you a bunch of pictures and describe what you're seeing. Poutine. Fries with gravy and cheese curds. Peameal bacon. Enough said. Montreal-style bagels. Montreal smoked meats. Pemmican. Very specifically cooked meat taken from the Native Americans. Donairs, they're like kebabs but with like a milk sauce thingy. Maple syrup with literally anything. Nanaimo bars, vanilla, custard, and chocolate. Beaver tails, fried dough, but that doesn't do it justice. It tastes so good. Butter tarts, which are literally just buttered tarts. Oka cheese, caribou. Red wine, Canadian whiskey, and maple syrup, formerly also caribou blood. And finally, Tim Hortons. Wherever I am in Canada, if I enter a Tim Hortons, it's like entering home. So beloved is Tim Hortons to Canadians that a Tim Hortons was opened specifically for Canadian troops outside Kandahar in Afghanistan. Finally, we come to the last portion of this week's video, Canadian identity. I can talk to you about the national symbols of Canada like the flag of Lester B. Pearson or the history of Canada before and after Confederation, which I'll probably do in a completely separate series. But let me take this opportunity to propose a theory. Canadians, wherever they travel in the world, are fixed with the label nice. Nice is a part of our cultural identity. The CBC did a documentary a number of years ago about the most commonly spoken word in Canada. I was almost certain it was going to be something stereotypical like a, but it turns out that it was unbelievably the word sorry. I started realizing this on my daily activities. Canadians apologize profusely, and I don't know whether that has shaped their culture or whether our culture created that. Canada as a government has always advocated peace, order, and good government. Since the days of Baldwin and LaFontaine, Canada has always been culturally independent of both Britain and America. When Canada received true and real independence from the United Kingdom, it began a shift to markedly different foreign affairs. Canadians were quick to answer the call for help from distressed nations, but were not quick to go to war themselves, for example avoiding the colossal messes that were Vietnam and Iraq. Canada was very quick to adopt the idea of a welfare state, and most political parties in Canada believe honestly that it is their duty to assist everyone in Canada, from the richest to the poorest. Canadians look after each other. In an OECD study, 92% of Canadians reported being able to find people that they could count on in times of trouble, and the variation between rich and poor was low, 89% among the poorest fifth and 94% among the richest. The country is a country of helpers, truly compassionate for their neighbors and giving a helping hand whenever possible. That is why I'm proud to call myself Canadian. I love my country, and I love the people that live and breathe it every day. This is a tremendous country, and we shouldn't settle for anything less than greatness. Together we can do good and create beauty and build a better tomorrow. So I ask you, why shouldn't we? Let's show the world why Canada is such a great country. Let's strive for what is good: equality, freedom, peace, justice. Let us walk together hand in hand into the future with an open mind, a firm heart, and a true hope. And we will change the world. Thank you for watching.
Oh, Canada.